So I've been wanting to do this for a while, but I wanted to make sure that my information was correct, my research, and I tell you folks, in doubt, Google it. If you think, if you question anything I say, Google it. Today, this is a subject that really needs to be addressed. I was doing some research, and I think Oprah and some of her folks are planning on making a movie about this. Everybody should be aware of hidden figures and how that was hid, okay? Well, so much in Black history, so many accomplishments that our folks have done have been hidden for various reasons. And this morning, it might be a little shocking to you, but especially the high school, the junior high, and the staff, we should be aware of this. This morning I'm going to speak on, and some of you older folks may have heard about this, Black Wall Street. Black Wall Street. Black Wall Street, 1921, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The Greenwood community was the most thriving Black community that this country has ever seen. I will repeat. In 1921, during the segregated times, Greenwood, Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Black community was the most thriving community that this country has ever seen, even up to this day. Now, I have some data that I'm going to share with you, and I want you, if you would, to pay strict attention. Now, this community was destroyed. And it was destroyed by jealousy. By jealousy. It had come to the point that the majority community had become very, very jealous of this community. This community was doing better than the majority community in all respects. In the 20s, oil was discovered in Oklahoma, and there had been a migration to the state, and people from all over the country had migrated to Oklahoma to enjoy the benefits of the oil boom. Now, we also know about the Trail of Tears, okay? I know my kids, they better know it. I've been speaking about it. Trail of Tears was a situation where Indians were moved from their homeland to the state of Oklahoma. Now, you have to understand that segregation being what it was back in that time, Black people moved with some of the Indians. Some of those folks even intermarried with the Indians, okay? And as a result, with all of this money being made in the oil industry, people moved there for work. They moved there for work. And some Black people were fortunate enough to buy land, and they pooled their resources together, and they started establishing businesses and stuff. And they stuck together. So just let me, before we get into that, just let me put this to you. In 1619, we all know, Blacks were brought to America. In 1865, slavery ended. In 1964, we have the Civil Rights Bill passed. So if you would subtract 1964 from 1865, we have 99 years. But during this time, we had the black codes, we had segregation, and so forth. Now, I just mentioned that blacks were brought to this country in 1619, but slavery ended in 1865, which was a period of what? 246 years, okay? So if you would add 246 years to 99 years, you would come up with what? 345 years. In all practical purposes, blacks in this country have been enslaved for 345 years. Okay? Now let's do another thing. What about the time from 1964, Civil Rights Bill passed, up until now, we'll say? How many years is that? From 1964 up until now, 2019. So what is that? 50 what? 57, 58, okay? So in all practical purposes, we have not been free up until what? About 50, 56, 57 years, okay? Because you have to understand, prior to 1964, you know, a lot of us couldn't vote, a lot of us couldn't eat in places that, you know, that we should have eaten. So, and then we still having problems, okay? So, the struggle continues. But just let me give you some history about this community. I mentioned that it was destroyed. You know how it was destroyed? The majority community got into airplanes, right, Doc? Got into airplanes and bombed this community, destroyed it. And I'm gonna tell you what they had and how they destroyed it. They dropped kerosene bombs, turpentine bombs down on this community and destroyed it. And the reason being is because these people had stuck together, unlike a lot of things that we do now, pooled their resources and got all of this wealth. Now let me read you some stuff here. I kind of got this together last night, dude. 10,000 people became homeless. Josie Pickens writes in Ebony magazine, this modern, majestic, sophisticated, unapologetic black community boasted of banks. They had banks. They had hotels. They had restaurants, cafes. They had clothing stores. They had movie theaters and contemporary homes. Not to mention luxuries such as Indo plumbing. Now this is 1921. And a remarkable school system that superiorly educated black children. Undoubtedly, less fortunate white neighbors resented their upper class lifestyle. As a result of a jealous desire to put progressive, high-achieving Afro-Americans in their place, a wave of domestic white terrorism caused black dispossession. Now, nobody is against, you know, I mean, we're not racist around here, but we're just giving some history, okay? They reaped the benefits of a school system which some of their white counterparts did not. Recognizing the value of education, now listen to this, teachers. Teachers were highly respected and better compensated than other professionals. They lived in brick homes, furnished with Louis XIV dining room sets, fine china, and Steinway pianos, wrote James Hurst in Riot and Remembrance, the Tulsa Race War and its legacy. Now, a year or two ago, we did a piece on Willie Lynch and how this concept divided black folk, having different sexes against one another, light skin versus black skin, okay, educated versus educated, and just created a whole lot of havoc in the community. This did not exist in Greenwood. This did not exist. American history is full of stories of black people, precisely what America says it wants of its citizens. Being creative, enterprising, industrious, being self-respecting and self-sufficient, only to have some whites destroy what they've built, impede their progress, and erase their wealth. And those are not far off stories. Greenwood is an example. The story of Tulsa's Black Wall Street remains one of the most inspirational and devastating parts of our history. Yet, it is still unknown by many. If you would like to learn more about the Tulsa Race Riot, you can check out Black Wall Street from Riot to Renaissance in Tulsa's historic Greenwood District by Hannibal Johnson. Now, despite racial discrimination and Jim Crow segregation, the Greenwood District offered proof that black entrepreneurs were capable of creating vast wealth. Based on critical analysis of these events, there is evidence that whites perceived Afro-Americans as an economic threat to that city. For those who supported black subjugation, witnessing blacks strive and defy the stereotypes of black inferiority was too much. Now, many whites believed that at that time that they were members of a divinely ordered superior race. Despite their inflated perceptions of themselves, now I want you to listen to this. Now this is the most important piece, I think, of it. This blew my mind, and this is why I had to really make sure that this information was factual. Despite their inflated perceptions of themselves, there were 3 blacks in Oklahoma worth $1 million each. A man named J.W. Thompson was worth $500,000. There were a number of men and women worth $100,000, and many whose possessions were valued at $25,000 and $50,000 each. This was particularly true of Tulsa, while there were 2 colored men worth $150,000 each, 2 worth $100,000, 3 $50,000, and 4 were amassed at $25,000. Now, what you got to understand is that in 1921, I said $50,000. You know what it would be right now? $647,000. You know what $1 million back then was worth now? $13 million. You had this kind of wealth in this community, and it was shocking, and people couldn't stand it. So as a result, they got up in airplanes and bombed this community. Now, let me give you some more facts about this community. And like I say, this is kind of but you need to know You really need to know. In a time when the entire state of Oklahoma had only 2 airports, listen to this, dig this. In a time when the entire state of Oklahoma had only 2 airports, there were 6 black families who owned their own planes. The average income for a black family was well over what minimum wage is today. That was the average. Dr. Simon Berry, who owned the bus system in Tulsa, black man owned the whole bus system in Tulsa, recalled that in 1910, his average income was around $500 a day. Now, I did some figuring last night when I read this, and $500 a day comes out something like $184,000 a year. Now, how many millions is that? In the day, in this day time, in this day and time, okay? This is kind of wealth that was there, showing you what black folk could do when they stick together, okay? When the community was burned down in Tulsa's race riot, over 800 people were admitted to surrounding hospitals. Now, this is depressing. Listen. An estimated 10,000 were left homeless. 35 city blocks housing 1,256 residents were destroyed, and 600 successful businesses were lost, including 21 restaurants, 30 grocery stores, 2 movie theaters, and a hospital. Now, after it was all over and done, were the black people discouraged? No, they were not. This is what happened. In the initial years after the riot, surviving residents began to rebuild the once vibrant city. It thrived again. Now, I want us to listen to this. It thrived again until the desegregation of the 1950s and the 60s began to entice black people of the time to live elsewhere, causing Black Wall Street to never again be what it was. Why do we see Chinese communities right out here in Las Vegas? Why do we see all of these, Mexican establishments right out here all over the country? Why do we see all these hair places that we buy our hair from, not even owned by us? Why do we see that? Because we have been duped by the Willie Lynch syndrome. We're not good enough. Other folks' stuff is better than ours. But way back in 1921, black folks stuck together and established the most wealthiest community that this nation has ever known up until this day. And by jealousy and enviousness, it was destroyed. And what we have to understand, and I'm closing, what we have to understand and what we have to watch out for. This is why you're here in the PA Arms Academy, to get skills, to be trained, to stick together. Our leadership is always saying, look, we are a family. What can we do? If they did it way back then, we can do tremendous things right now. Pray my strength to the Lord.
Come on, let's give him a big hand. Good job. He always brings us some enlightening facts. He's given us thinking, I was like, wow, Deacon has always just given us just a treasure of information, from inventors to where and how not just slavery began, but how, in a sense, some of it is still existing. And it's not slavery of shackles of hands and feet, but it's of your mind. And a lot of times you always wonder, and it always comes up, Deke, isn't it just amazing? When we get the lowest number of Student of the Month, it always comes around Black History Month. What am I saying? I'm saying it's the purpose that we don't make our minds and sharpen our minds and use the skills of which we see our ancestors had to do. I tell you all this every year. I could probably have a laminated script that says you spit in your ancestors' face every time you don't study. Every time you refuse, you rather turn on a television than open up a book. Every time you refuse to take that extra hour, just that extra time over the weekend, to say, I know I did my homework, but I'm going to study. Bishop said something that it looked like the ghost of Christmas, past, present, and future came in the room on your faces. He said, go to the library and check out a book, even if it's not for homework. You all turned white as ghosts. But it should not be so foreign. Ladies and gentlemen, what he's showing us is there are people, despite adversity, despite the ability, yes, they had to teach their own selves to read. They were finding scraps and bits of paper and literature that their employers, but they weren't getting paid for it, so they called their masters, threw out and tried to teach them and their children and those around on plantations how to read. They were beaten for being educated. You are free to be educated, but you refuse. So you make yourselves your own slaves. You think you're your own big bad person. I don't want to do my homework. I'll cheat. I'll do whatever. You think you can do that and you don't think you're being enslaved? That's not you deciding to do that, but you're letting the devil tell you. You can't be this, you can't be that. You pull off you have like a C average. Okay, it's fine. That's good enough for you. But we're here today, myself, Deacon, and all your teachers and different people that are out here supporting the academy are here saying not so. That's not good enough for you. There are people, ladies and gentlemen, lean forward. There are people, young people, that died for you to be in this position. But you're not even making your death worthwhile. How do we go back and say thank you to people that have given their lives, not just so we can vote, so you can get a free education, so you can walk around and go in corporate America and get a good job? And you can sit and there's equality. No, it may not always be fair, but you can still put your mind and brain for it. How do we say thank you? You know how you say thank you? You live for Christ. You live an honest life and life of integrity. You study. You work hard. Don't cheat. You're gypping yourself. You are smart. You do have a mind. You can be the next Wall Street, a godly one. God can use you in the Asher blessing, but you got to start using this. You got to start saying this is good enough. Okay, so even if you got a B, if you know you could have gotten an A, that's not good enough. I don't care if even your parents say, oh, you didn't make Student of the Month. Don't worry about it. You do take concern and say, no, this is important. It may not be important to you, but you know, it's important to me and some people that died that I can make sure I can get this education. And the ultimate death was Christ Jesus. Amen. And he wants you to grow and to learn and to be something in society that represents who he is, and it backs up the scripture that I can do all things through Christ that gives me strength.